people, and I guess maybe this is the time to talk about the statistics in Ventura. So here's the report. I had it in 2018 because I've read it at the E.P. Foster Library. That's actually where I think Anita had seen me read, and she's part of this wonderful community, and I'm going to save that idea though for later, but I read these statistics last year in 2018, and I was going to rehash them, and I'm like, come on, Brian, don't be a hack. You got to go and look at 2019. And I was so sad this morning when I did. I know we talk a lot about keeping hope. In Ventura, this past year, in Ventura County, homelessness increased by 28.5% compared to last year. And last year it already had jumped 12.5%. And the reason I wrote this book is because I saw this trend coming. I'm like, whoa, there are a lot of people that are out here struggling. And this problem's probably only going to get worse until it gets better, until we rectify it and at least acknowledge it. But I did not think, especially after the pushback we saw when the homeless man who was mentally ill, murdered, and I'll use the word murdered, when he murdered the guy at the promenade. We saw the city push back, and there was all this backlash, and hopefully I thought action might come of that. Like, hey, we'll get a shelter. We can get some people the help that they need, because obviously people are unstable, people need help. This unshelteredness is causing people to continuously lose their mind. But it increased 28.5%. We saw that now 75 compared to 63% of the homeless population is unsheltered. Nowhere for people to go. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. You rose your hand, Mara. That's perfect.
So my question is, are you talking about homelessness that they lost everything? What about the homeless that are drug dependent?
That's a good question.
I mean, because we see a lot of that in the hospital. We see a lot of them, a lot of the homeless. So my question is to you, what are you talking about?
So the statistics here speak to homelessness in general. So they took this survey, they went to the city of Ventura and Oxnard. By the way, Oxnard and Ventura are the two highest populated areas, not surprisingly for those of us that live here with homeless. So in Ventura actually was the highest at 555 people they had counted, and Oxnard was second at 598. Santa Paula had 106. So there's just kind of a correlation. But what we're talking about with the unsheltered are anyone that is considered homeless that does not have a place to live, that is living without a fixed address and without a roof over their head, basically. And I was shocked, especially now when Tyler brought up a wet winter, 12% increase of unsheltered homeless. And when I've heard from people now that it was a cold winter and it was a wet winter, and the fact that we saw a 28.5% increase in homelessness, and not only that 12% of it more now are unsheltered. 3 out of 4 people that are homeless are unsheltered. And that's been the biggest disparity between homelessness on the East Coast and homelessness on the West Coast. As I tried to wrap my head around it this year, because I still see a lot of poverty, because Philadelphia is very poverty stricken, I thought their hair's washed. They don't have a backpack with a tent or with a blanket on it. They don't look like there's just dirt. You shake someone's hand, and I've done that. I have no problem doing that. Their hands are not gripped in dirt and caked in dirt. They're cleaner because they're not unsheltered. They still can be homeless, but they're not unsheltered. So to the statistics, they can still be drug dependent, but that number specifically spoke to the people that are living outside that had no place to go. So if we don't put a shelter within Oxnard or Ventura, it's only going to get worse. Yeah, Dan.
Are you seeing on the East Coast a lot of the not in my backyard philosophy that we're seeing in Southern California, especially reading about in Orange County? And I don't want to just pick on Orange County because it's a Trump area or something like that.
Yeah. Dan, I think you make a great point. Little scene right there.
But are you seeing, because that seems to be a big part of the problem is, we don't want it in our backyard.
Yeah. No, I think,
the shelters.
The shelters,
yeah.
I think that's specifically more California-based because California has a higher homeless population. I can speak to the drug habit because Philadelphia has one of the highest rate of opioid addictions in the country. Philadelphia, this section called Kensington, is like on the East Coast, is like the capital for opioid addiction, and they're trying to open up a safe house for people so they can inject cleanly. But that has gotten a lot of pushback, not here. Yeah. And I'm like, if they're not going to do it here, they're not going to do it anywhere. Because we're in Kensington right now, and Kensington is struggling. But to your point, the numbers are just drastically different. So no, I'm not seeing that. I still kept my LA Times subscription. I thought about canceling it, and I called the LA Times like, hey, I'm a teacher, I don't have all this money. And they're like, we'll just slice your subscription in half. And I was like, okay. So I kept it, and as I've been reading it, I just saw in Venice, for instance, like 2 days ago, they're using environmental protection laws to keep shelters from opening in their neighborhoods. So they're using the legislation to say, not in my backyard, but they now have legal justification to prove or to at least uphold that in the courts. So it's not this whole NIMBY thing. And you're right, Orange County is not the only one. We're seeing this in Ventura, we're seeing this in San Francisco, we're seeing this in Los Angeles, especially Venice, like I said, San Diego. No one really wants it. Property value is huge here. You pay $600,000 for a house. Of course, you don't really want to have a homeless population there, but it gets to the idea of where are they gonna go? We have so many people. There has to be a better solution, and we have to compromise. There has to be some sort of compromise because the income inequality, the fact that California is so desirable. I got here this morning. I woke up. I walked outside. I go, I miss the mountains. I miss the mountains. I miss the mountains. I can deal with the water, whatever. The mountains are spectacular. And people, I was telling my buddy Pete this. California is a sanctuary state, not just for immigration, but for homelessness. If you have a car that can get you to the West Coast, you can be unsheltered now. So California is a leader in so many things in our country, and California will have to make it a point to say, how do we fix this issue? Because income inequality is sweeping our nation, but we're seeing it most predominantly between California and up the coast all the way to Seattle. I'm gonna actually bash on Seattle in a little bit, not yet though, because of the tax that they struck down. But actually I'll go back to Ventura now. So that's some of the statistics and the data. So I went to Topa Topa a while ago. So I read poetry. It's not all depressing, I promise you. It is not all social justice oriented. Some of it's about love. Some of it's about Mother Nature. Some of it's about teaching. Some of it's, I don't know, about what I'm thinking. Some of it's the writing process. I love writing about writing. That's like a fun thing to do. But I went to Topa Topa, and when I read sometimes in bars, it's fun because, and shout out to Bobby. Bobby's the one that kind of got me hooked on that. Roberta was trying to hide in the corner. We were going to these open mics, and I would hit him. I'd always hit him with the homeless stuff though, because it's something that we have to talk about. But I would cake it in after I've kind of messed around with some other topics. And I finished doing this reading at Topa Topa in downtown Ventura, and I had this I wouldn't call her a young lady, but this lady come up to me, and the story that she shared with me. And the stories that I've heard from a lot of people, this has been a project that I've done for about 4 years now. And the stories and the conversations that I've had have been so enlightening. And this was probably the most enlightening conversation that I've had. It was early on in this book that I was writing it. I probably only had 10 poems at this point. But she had talked to me, and it forever changed my perception on homelessness, but it also gave me some factual data to use or something logically to think about when people ask, why don't they get a job? And that's the name of this poem. It's called, Why Don't They Get a Job? Everyone has a story. So for every story you share, someone, somewhere can relate. Tonight, it was Tatiana. With her fingers grasping my forearm, she thanked me for thinking of the homeless. She had her own story. I come from Ukraine, and when I was younger, my mother and I took trains to Russia while she looked for work. We had no permanent home, which meant no permanent work. After interviews, they wanted a number to call, but no phone means no job. Her words reminded me of the line that people popularly use to describe their view on homelessness. Why don't they just get a job? I shared this with her. My mother tried. Embarrassed, she asked if she could contact them in a few days to find out. It rarely worked. As our conversation closed and I began to walk home, I kept thinking of Tatiana's story. To escape deep poverty, you need a job. In order to get a job, you need a place of contact. When that's not there, you rely on the willingness of a stranger to extend their hand and subsequently change your narrative, all in the hopes of rewriting a story that is never, ever as simple as it seems. You guys gotta clap, man. It's like, yo, I know it's heavy stuff, people. I know it's heavy stuff. I appreciate it. I was like, oh man, this crowd dead. You're not dead. I know it's awkward. I had a friend, Dan, in the middle of my last set. He just like stood up and said, yeah! But it wasn't about homelessness. It was kind of about something they were talking about me, and I was like, Dan, you're embarrassing, but wow, I appreciate your energy. So I kind of already shared this. Actually, this is the chance to talk about that reading. Shout out to the E.P. Foster Library. That's where I got met Anita. Anna and I would go read. Julie would show up. Elise would go and support us. The E.P. Foster Library in downtown Ventura holds open mics every Thursday, which is right now. And it's kind of a bummer I can't get there, but I am so grateful for them. I have not found a poetry scene in Philadelphia, but their scene has empowered me to write this book. This book does not happen unless Phil Taggart, unless Marcia De La O, unless Friday Gretchen. unless John White, unless there are active artists in the community that are sharing their thoughts and sharing their ideas, because they made a safe place for people to go to talk about issues that matter. And again, without them, this doesn't happen. Without hearing other poets share their thoughts on gender equality, on immigration, on political views, I wouldn't have had the courage to write this, nor would I have had the skill to write this. And this kind of brings us back to being in the public library. E.P. Foster's the public library in downtown Ventura. Now we are here in Santa Paula at the Blanchard Community Library. Libraries are places for people to go to get free knowledge. And in the world that we're living in, knowledge isn't often free. Yeah, we can get it from our phone, but higher education is expensive. School is becoming privatized across the board. I think it's important that we understand the role that the libraries play in our community. But if y'all have been to any public libraries, you're going to see that there's a big homeless population that's in or around the library because it provides a public service. Seattle was that way. San Diego, Portland. San Diego, I was just talking to Justin in the back. San Diego, who's been in the San Diego library recently? Was it gnarly when you went over there?
Yeah, it's pretty much any big city's public library is similar.
It's wild, and I use a little bit of photography in my book, and the transition I use. There's a guy sleeping right in front of the LA library, and you go into these libraries. I've watched people wash their shirts. I've watched people sleep. I've watched people charge. And it's really enlightening when you can go to a place that is public and just to see the people that are in need of help, but also the people that are reading, that are stimulating their mind, and that are trying to just reconnect with some part of their community. I guess this is a good time though to talk about Seattle. So I went to Seattle, and who's been in the Seattle Library? Beautiful. Probably one of the coolest structures, and probably one of the most beautifully designed pieces of architecture. But Seattle, and I don't know if anybody knows the tax that they had passed 2 years ago, and then Amazon and Starbucks got really angry about it, and they had the city council actually reversed. They reversed their ruling. So it's called like the workers' head tax, right? So each corporation, and they had, and I made sure I get this right because I made sure to write this down. There were 600 companies, and these companies were not just your mom and pops. They were companies that were grossing over $200 million per year. So companies that were very well off. And there were 600 companies that was going to raise about $47 million for the city of Seattle. That year, the city of Seattle had 167 people that died on the streets. Because if you think about the weather in Seattle and hypothermia and how that kind of accumulates, and if anyone's been to Seattle, underneath the 5 freeway, it is gnarly. It's nuts. People are intense, and it's martial law at that point. So they had this tax in place. They had the public's approval, they passed it, and then once Amazon and once Starbucks got wind of this, they pushed back. They started campaign funds, and within about 3 or 4 days, that tax was reversed. That tax was erased. And Seattle is struggling. Seattle calls a state of emergency. They are one of 10 places that calls a state of emergency, not for any natural disaster, but for a humanitarian crisis that is homelessness. So I was super upset about that, obviously, because Jeff Bezos is the richest man in the world, and then when he's going to get divorced, his wife will be the 3rd richest person in the world. So the fact that you have such an influx of wealth that is concentrated, and when you had this starting to be divided up to social services, I mean, I don't love Philadelphia's city tax. It sucks. I got friends that actually say that they're from New Jersey, so they don't have to pay the city tax. Because the city tax is no joke, but it goes back to the social services for a city that has a huge poverty problem. So you're paying into the community. Seattle pushed back on that, and it's very upsetting. But I love the library. So I'm actually going to read this one. It's called Public Knowledge. How are we on time? Whew, okay, we're not that bad, but I got to kind of hurry up. I mean, those are my students in the back. They know. One of my favorite phrases is
So
like,
do you shop Amazon now?
it's so funny. No, I got rid of my Amazon Prime. I said, screw you, Amazon. But here's the real awkward moment when I say this is from CreateSpace and it's a subset of Amazon. They will let you greenlight any idea. So I had the marketing skills enough to sell 1,000 copies because I was, I don't know, because I love to read and write and I published it, but I got rid of Prime. I said, you're not gonna get my $110. I will shop locally. I'm not. And everyone's like, you're stupid. Like, I'm gonna get this tomorrow. I'm like, okay, I'll wait like 10 days or I'll just go and get it in the community. So yeah, no Amazon for me. Who was that? Was that you, Rosie? All right, Rosie, yeah, okay. This one's public knowledge. Yeah, cool. I read this actually at a Poetry Out Loud event at Villanova a while back that Julie was running. And by the way, Peter, nice job with that poetry out loud. If you want a sense of what poverty looks like in any city, head to the public library, a building constructed upon the ideology that everyone in the community, regardless of skin tone and income, should have equal access to resources and knowledge that the brain so desperately craves. West Coast libraries prove pivotal to those with no home to charge phones, no computer to look for jobs and housing, no access to ideas other than their own. This is a safe space that provides temporary relief from the streets. In Seattle, I saw people passed out on tables while others rifled through magazines. In Portland, I witnessed a man washing his shirt in the bathroom sink. In Los Angeles, where the public library serves the largest pool of residents, I watched a man brush his teeth while a stroller was parked in the stall. I walked through the second and third floors, which were brimming with community tables packed with people from all parts of the city. The police stroll through, looking for sleepers, looking for something, letting it be known that if you aren't trying to stimulate your mind, then you are out of time. Libraries are like little communities. When we walk through those doors, our differences dissipate. Yes, some smell more than others. Some have extra baggage they can't let go of, but we enter to activate the brain, to get lost in a story that can provide hope needed to get through another day, another night, reminding us through the written word not to give up, reminding us through art that we are better when the community comes together, reminding us with each punch of the keyboard or each stroke of the pen that the public library and the public are intertwined, our stories merging, if only for a moment, at a building where equality and equal access is and forever will be for everyone in the community. Okay. Moving on to mental illness. Again, something that is not fun to talk about, but something that is becoming more perpetual in our society. For those of us that are teachers, I think specifically we see more and more kids struggling with how to handle their emotions. And these kids will soon become adults. And when they become adults and they have not yet figured out how to fully process what they think and what they feel, this is where the danger sets in. And if we continue to stigmatize mental illness or not talk about it, we're doing a disservice to everyone, specifically our community. My dad's a doctor, my mother's in healthcare, she was a nurse, so I've kind of seen a different angle of healthcare. And for me, again, I work with the public. I think anyone that specifically works with the public has a good pulse on how people are feeling and how that has shifted in the last few years. So I'm going to actually just start with this poem called What We Don't See, and the need to try to think about how do we rehabilitate those people that are struggling with mental illness, because a lot of this, in whether it's drug dependency, whether it's mental